Hey everybody, welcome back to Shutter Magazine. I'm Dustin Lucas, and today I'm continuing my Lightroom workflow series with Part 4, Advanced Editing. Before jumping into Lightroom, I sort of want to break down what we've done thus far. We've taken our files from our memory card, stored them, archived them onto an external hard drive. We've created multiple catalogs, went through Lightroom to figure out what type of catalog to work in. Today I'm working in a single client catalog rather than a master catalog, and I'll get back to the reason why I'm doing that. And then we've also done the selection and color correction, which I know it's something that Sal kind of calls monkey work when doing the color correction, but now we're on to sort of the more exciting, more stylistic and creative editing. But also you have to remember that these are proof level images. These aren't images I'm going to blow up on a 30 by 40 canvas. This isn't something I'm going to necessarily surprise the client with having a print on the wall, but it's something to take your proof-ready images, showing something to your client, but also sort of doing all of your editing in Lightroom. So let's jump back in to our catalog and start from there. The biggest thing where we're at now is I've broken my images down between 3 stars and 5 stars. I started with about a little over 1,600 images I chose for 3 stars, which I thought these were good enough to show to the client. But they definitely need to be culled down even further because I don't really need to color correct 1,600 images. That starts to get a little over the top as far as what I'm delivering to them. So I'm always kind of shooting for that 800 to 1,000 images. I'm not always tied to that number, but I think that's a good number of images. I mean, after that, I just don't think they're going to care about that many images. So what I've done is I've sorted those final color corrected images into 5 stars. And what I start to do is I start to do my labeling system. I start out with sort of a tier 1, which are these 3 stars, sort of the selection, picking good images. And then I do my 5-star edits, which those are going to be my color corrected images. And then what I start to do is break them down into different options outside of that. And so what you're going to notice here is I have multiple types of edits. I have the color correction, I have deluxe edits, premium edits, a signature edit, as well as I start to do an assortment of black and white images as well. And that's I usually duplicate the deluxe edit for that style as well, but we can get into that once we get more heavy-handed into the editing. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at managing these files. So we've gotten this 863 images, and what we're going to do is we're going to start going through there. We're going to pull out top 50 images, top 60 images. Again, I'm not married to that number, but it's just a good one to start with. You don't want to do an extensive amount of editing on hundreds of images. I mean, you're spending a crazy amount of time on those images, and you have to start to think about, well, which ones are you going to sell? You're not going to sell a canvas print of 50 images. You have to start breaking those down. As you see my images and the way that I'm labeling, they start to go up in sort of importance or something I think that the client's going to buy. So what I want to start with is sort of going back over a little bit how we were managing files before. You have this option where you can start to add folders where your raw file is. So if I'm breaking files down and making changes in my folder here, what it's actually going to do is it's going to relay that into Lightroom, into Finder, as we saw before. So by clicking plus here, if I'm selected on my short wedding, this folder, and I'm creating a subfolder, what that's going to allow me to do is, so we create our folder, we'll do selected. So what this is going to do is it's going to start to take my raw files, all the 5 stars, and let's filter by the specifically 5-star rating. So that way we're only selecting, we have 963 files, being that I had some of my duplicates already, created some virtual copies. So we're going to go ahead and do 5 stars, 863, select all those, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a subfolder. We're going to include the selected files, and we're going to do, let's just call these selected files, so we can take our all of our discarded or our rejected photos can be in one folder, and all the selected files will be in another. And so what it's going to do is it's going to start to actually move these files. I'm going to stop this process only because I don't need to continue it. It's not normally a proper workflow, the proper way to work, but this is an option that you have in Lightroom, which it'll actually take the folder that you have on your drive, and it actually starts to move those raw files out of your originals. The benefit of doing that is just if you're the type of person to where you're only going to keep the selected files and you throw away all the rest, by all means, that's perfectly fine to do. But I always say that there's always that image in the reception that you miss of you know, Uncle John or somebody specifically that you didn't include in the selection that the bride's going to ask for. Well, if you delete that file, you know, you're kind of in troubled waters there. So you definitely want to keep all of your original shots. And I think breaking those down into different folders can be a little confusing. I think you should always have all the RAWs in one folder and move on from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all those files, move them back into my RAW folder, just because I want to keep all those RAWs together. I'm not too worried about that. What we're going to do now is we're going through and we're going to look at those the 5-star selection, and we're going to start to pick images. And regardless of what color label I'm using for now, what I like to do is to just flag them until we decide what we're going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to go through some of these images and just start flagging them. I mean, in a normal case, I'd be going a little more, you know, be paying attention a little bit closer to you know, what type of images I'm looking for. But you know, you're starting to pick out, you know, a couple of nice shots of the groom by himself, you know, a few images like that, and going through that process. I mean, I don't think we need to get into the selection process for those types of edits. I think it's just showing those images and what we need to do with them next is the big thing. So in looking at our selected files, say these files here were the ones I want to start doing my advanced edits for. Perfect. So what we have right now is we have these images. They're imported into Lightroom. If I make changes to them, it's going to make changes to the color corrected image. Well, I want to create a copy of that. Well, how do I do that? It's very simple. We need to create virtual copies, which are a fantastic tool in Lightroom where you can create multiple variants of the same image. And it doesn't add those images on your hard drive. It's not copying the RAW files. All it's doing is making a copy within Lightroom and allowing you to do multiple adjustments and stylistic effects to the same RAW file. And those adjustments don't really exist until you export that file. They just sort of live in Lightroom and don't take up any extra space. So what we're going to do is with these files selected, we're going to do Command apostrophe. And what it's going to do is it's going to tear up the bottom left-hand corner, kind of showing us that it's created this virtual copy. So what I like to do now is in these selections over these collections down here, what I like to do is I like to take those files and drag them into a collection. So what I'll actually do is, in selecting these virtual copies I just made, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag them right into the black and white folder. So what it's going to do is it's going to give me the option of to select just those files. And if I want to hit the V key and turn those into black and white and start to throw up the contrast, I can start to distinguish between these files and in my original ones here. So it's going to show these virtual copies here as well as in this folder. You also have another option. I'm going to go back a couple steps before we created these virtual copies. And what we can also do is we can add these to a collection or create a collection. So for instance, if I wanted to create a specific collection, I can also create virtual copies at the same time. So for instance, if I wanted to just call this details, start to break down different parts of the day by the different collections, what I can do is I can create a details collection, include selected photos, these ones that I did, and make virtual copies. So I'm going to hit create. And so what it's going to do is it's going to grab those and automatically throws them into. And so what you notice is that they go away, so we only have our color corrected images here. I kind of like that organization a little bit better than our previous step where I kind of had the duplicates within this catalog. I don't like that as much. It's not as organized. So now what we have here in these details are really great to do black and white for. So what we can start to do is throw up the contrast, keep those in black and white. So now that we have these copies, and now I have a black and white version as well as my color correction version, and all my color corrected images will be within this selects collection, which I like to do. So on my raw files, once I get my 5 stars filtered, what I like to do is take those files and drag them into my selects. This has all of the files total. You could also do a color corrected if you want to get a little more organized. I also have one for my original, so I just kind of breaking everything down into different collections, I think, is a really great way to have a virtual organization within Lightroom rather than creating different folders. These different folders on the hard drive, they're just not necessary. Lightroom can take care of a lot of that at a virtual level. So what I want to do is I want to pull up an image that we've selected and start looking at local adjustments. So for this image here, For this gentleman, I like to do a little bit of skin softening, a little bit of darkening this window, a little bit of work outside of what my sliders were capable of doing. And as you see here, I'm going to go ahead and reset these so you can see the effects that I've done and some of the adjusting. What we're going to do is we're going to do some local adjustments. So we're going to start out by looking at the adjustment brush by hitting the K key. And so what you're going to notice is you're going to see this spiral brush showing up here, very similar to Photoshop. And you're also going to have this panel off to the right with all of these very recognizable adjustments and settings. You see the exposure, contrast, highlights, those kind of things. But what we want to start out with doing is figuring out what kind of effect we want to paint on this gentleman. So by clicking in the effects presets, you have an option, and all of these are sort of options that are only going to adjust those specific settings. So for instance, if I want to remove the highlight on his face and I'm painting in just on his face here, just on the front, what I can actually do is, holding the option key, I can lower those highlights by dragging them to the left. And as you see, what it's allowing me to do, we can toggle this on and off. I'm going to kind of zoom in here a little bit so you can see better. Toggling this on and off, you can see it's removing those highlights. So it's I'm going to go ahead and just remove that pen for now. So these adjustments here, it's going to only adjust one of these settings at a time. Some of these other ones at the bottom here, these are custom ones where you're allowed to have multiple adjustments within one. So for instance, with the skin soften, if I select that, you're going to notice that it kind of has a few different options that are kind of showing up already. Well, I want some, if I want to take this skin softening and I want to drop some highlights out as well, maybe I'll put it to -15, pulling out just a little bit of contrast as well, dropping the whites, not too, maybe we'll leave that at 0. I think clarity is the big one for skin softening. And so what we can do is, now that we've done some of these changes, you're going to notice that next to skin soften preset, it's going to say edited. Well, it's not going to save this option. It's just saying that you've manipulated the already saved version. So what we can do is we can save the current preset, and we can call this skin soften. Do skin soft, and I like to do, we'll do highlight. So what this is going to allow me to do is it's going to create a new preset within there, which I can select. So if I go to skin soften, you're going to notice that the highlight option went away, and if I go to skin soften highlight, it's going to come back. Pretty neat, intuitive feature. So what we're going to do is now we're going to go ahead and paint, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select auto mask, and I'm going to allow this option, and I'm just going to paint, keep my circle kind of close to his face. Just see how well it does for all those options. So now that we're doing the skin softening, it's going to pull the highlights down to some of the other areas, which is fine. But we kind of want to apply this across the board. Well, now that we've done skin softening, we know, well, we've softened the eyes, we've softened the teeth, and that's not normally what you want to do. So what we're going to do by zooming into this gentleman is, you notice that our brush still says plus, so it's adding in the effect. So we can hold the option key, and it's going to toggle our erase brush. You also have those options here as well to click, but hotkeys are 100% where it's at as far as saving time and talking about workflow efficiency. That's just a small component of that. So we're going to hold option, and we're going to click on his eye, and you can see it's going to give us back some of that sharpness. Same thing here. We're going to scroll down here to the teeth, holding option, and I'm going to shrink my brush here, and I'm using the bracket keys to change that brush size. It's the same option you have in Lightroom as well, in Photoshop. And so we also have some other options we can do. What it's going to do is, as you notice, that as soon as I clicked on teeth whitening, I need to create a new brush altogether. So what we're going to do is, with teeth whitening, we're going to click here, just a real quick option. I'm going to zoom out here. Kind of got a little too soft, I think, on his skin here, so we're going to click back with this other pen, and what we can do is we can hold option and drag to the right, and it's going to remove, drag to the left and remove some of that effect. I don't know if we're going to drop it down that far. But what you can see here is sort of that difference in what it's created for us, and just doing a little bit of work. Of course, there's a much more extensive retouching that you can do in Lightroom, but this is just sort of showing you some quick local adjustments just to clean up this image. The adjustment brush is very versatile. It's a great option, but you know, it's not as quick when you're thinking about multiple images and editing a lot at a time. And that kind of brings us into another adjustment brush, which is the Radial Filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to an image where I want maybe a really small area that I want to you know, keep the same tone, and I want to darken everything around. You know, you always have those images like this one here. I think will work out really well. You always have those kind of images where you'd really like to darken around the environment around them, but in Lightroom you're like, man, brushing that in would take a long time, or doing that in Photoshop. Well, what you have is you have the option to do the Radial Filter by hitting Shift plus M. That pulls up the Radial Filter, and the way that this works is we always want to start by choosing specifically what effect we want to use. And what I like to do is always think of dragging from the center of your subject out to the outer edge. So you always pick the middle of where your subject is, click, and you're dragging. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of making it just a little bit bigger. I'm not trying to be super exact with it, but that's the effect. And so what we're doing is we're dragging to the left, and you can see how dark the environment gets. Maybe we can get really over dramatic, or we can kind of drag it down to make it look a little more photorealistic. Maybe pulling down just a stop around them. I think that looks kind of nice. We could toggle this on and off, and just seeing that difference. I mean, dragging in, talking about emphasizing your subject and really drawing attention, drawing your viewer into your subject. It's a great tool for that. Another way that you can use this tool is by holding Shift, and you'll get a perfect circle. So what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to drag that circle if your subject's sort of in a different position, or they're they're in a different part of the photo, or just kind of what you're wanting to keep. You have a perfect circle option as well. But the radial filter, what's great about that is when we're using this there's gonna hit some areas where we want to remove the effect, of course, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select here. I'm going to drag my effect down. Well, I have some of this road here that I want to get rid of. I have some spots in here. Well, very simply, all we need to do is we just need to toggle our brush. So we'll do Shift plus T. Oh, kind of clicked on the wrong one here. So we're on brush. We have the same option once we click on the brush option. And I think if we toggle T, it'll give us the brush or not. So here's edit mode, and if we hit Shift T, it gives it to the brush, where we can add the effect in other areas, but then also we have our option key where we can remove the effect. So I'm going to go in here, let's see here, and I want to add that effect in there, just kind of behind her, where it's kind of fading. I also want to add that effect in here. And I'm doing this very quickly. Please don't criticize my brush work. It's definitely just sort of quickly going through this and zooming in, giving us just a quick edit here. You know, kind of going in that area. It's going to take a little more work to get to remove from their faces, but by all means, we can sort of work like that. And this needs a little more adjusting. Let's see here. We'll close that. Zooming out and kind of seeing, where we've gotten. This effect might be a little dramatic. Oops, sorry. For what I'm looking for, but we can definitely make adjustments, kind of get something going. But it gives you an option, when you're working in other images and you just want to do some quick, brush work. Same way here. If we want to take this image, and I'm going to go ahead and reset it from our, go ahead and reset those brushes there, so we can do another type of quick edit here, kind of grabbing the middle of him, kind of finding a rough outline, and just darkening that down. And this image here brings up a really good idea, as well as using the graduated filter, which we'll get into just a second. I want to show you the opposite effect that you can do with this image, which works really well, I think, for silhouette. So whenever you have the bride sort of off and by herself, an image like this, where normally I'd want to lift my exposure up to really brighten her. Well, what I kind of like to do is keep this dark environment because it's not as important to me, and I just want to sort of brighten her up. So what I can do is using my using the radial filter, I can just select right around her like that, and I can actually hit the apostrophe key, which will invert my mask. So right now what it's going to do is it's going to allow me to burn, if I'm burning everything down or brightening her up. This isn't the best effect that I'd want to use. Most likely I'd want to use the dodge feature. We could just kind of brighten her up, bring a little more life back into that area. We've definitely need to do some work where we're adding in, we're darkening in. Oop, this would be one where we want to remove that brightening effect. Just kind of taking the brush around her. So it's kind of giving us the ability to have this dark room, but we can brighten her up real quick. So it's working in a different way where your effect is going in a much smaller circle, and the way that you're doing that is having the you can pull the invert mask on. So it's a really great tool for smaller areas when we want to keep, if you're editing darker and you're just brightening up your subject, that's it's a very popular and very good way to sort of edit in a batched way. But you also have the ability to use the graduated filter, which on this image here we were talking about would be perfect for this one because you have him sort of in this left third here, and you want to just darken up the window here, just so there's not as much of a sort of an eyesore in that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the M key, and I'm actually going to take my cursor and drag from that side. So wherever you're dragging from is where the effect starts, and it starts to dissipate to the other side. So we're going to keep burn on, which we have, and we're going to hold the option key. I'm going to drag that down, and you can see how much of the effect is starting to come in. As you notice too, a little bit of it is starting to affect his face. So what we can have, specifically for this image, we can drop the highlights, maybe do less with exposure, but just pull the highlights down. And so if I drag this over closer to his face, it'll allow us to remove some of those highlights on his face as well as on the window. So if I just drag it a little bit further, we're toggling this on and off. Just removing that highlight just a little bit on his face as well as the window. So it works really well when you have an image where you're wanting to drag over that exposure effect, especially on an image like this. It's shot much darker. We're trying to brighten them up, but not brighten up everyone in the background. It's kind of an image where that graduated filter would be perfect for. So I'm going to go ahead and selecting here. Let's see here, is it going to let me? Nope. So we're going to drag this all the way over to here with our burn feature on. And what we're going to do is just darkening that background up, kind of figuring out how far we need to take. Let's see here. Going back to the graduated option here, holding so we can brighten, we can darken, but my idea is to kind of get it where it was shot, just so it doesn't look too dark, get it somewhere sort of in that realm, and you can kind of see our big difference in what that's doing for the image. And so what we can also do is holding option, if we're dragging, reset, new. For dragging this all the way over. It seems that Lightroom's a little unresponsive. We can definitely drag that down and get it kind of closer to where we had it originally. And I think that gets it, close enough for us. So for this image, I think it works really well for. Other images, I think a lot of photographers like to use is for skies, specifically like this one here. So I have this blown out, sort of bland looking sky. So what I want to do is I'll drag. What I want to do a burn, but I might want to create one with a little. Let's add some saturation. We can let's see here. We can drop some highlights. I think saturation is a pretty good one to do. We can take the temperature a little bit cooler. I don't want to go too far, but what we can do is now create a save preset for let's see, blue sky. Well, like I had mentioned in the articles, it's always good to put the area in the photo you're affecting and then to put the adjustment. So sky, do washed out. So that way when I'm choosing these out, I have, normally I'd have this skin, not softened skin, but skin softened here is right. Iris usually would be eye, teeth. So you always have this sort of part of the photo you're adjusting first and then the effects second, so they're sort of organized together. So I'm going to do sky washed out. I'm going to click at the top and drag right to over their head. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to increase that effect and just see where I need to go with it. I don't want to do too much, but I also have the ability to toggle, and I can go in and I can remove this from them, make sure it's not hitting anywhere on them. I don't really need it to affect a lot of this other stuff here. But what you're going to notice is just how much of a difference that does. Just real quick, just dropping that in for a sky, and it kind of gives us a gradient, very similar to what a sky would do. So you can drop that down even further. We can go lighter with it. The buildings are kind of taking effect as well. But I think that's plenty for just a quick edit, and I don't think it's going too far with the way that looks. I can really darken that up to make it look a little more fabricated, but I think that effect works really well, just for a little bit of blue in there. And it's for some that's not their, you can do a little more work with it, but it is a quick way to sort of get rid of that washed out sky for the most part. A couple last things I want to look over is the spot removal tool. This tool is it's great for removing hair, removing blemishes, removing pimples. You definitely have to remember. Oh, Lightroom's going a little crazy. Let's see here. So what we have here is we hit the Q key, and we want to zoom in pretty far into the bride. And so I have some hairs here that I'm wanting to get rid of. And so what I want to do is, in figuring out if I want to use the tone, the clone, or the heel, I have Shift T is what I'm using to toggle. I think I want to use the heel key. So as soon as, let's see here. Lightroom's being a pain right now. I'm going to go ahead and quit it. Reopen it back up. Seems to be running a little slow for me. Alrighty, so I'm going to hit Q. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower this shrink the size of this brush, and I'm just going to try and get rid of all this hair in one fell swoop. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go up, we're going to paint this big kind of section of hair here. I don't know how much, I don't know how crazy we want to get, but we'll grab that. As you're going to notice, it's automatically going to select and sample from an area that looks pretty close and pretty good. So what I'm going to do is leave that alone, and just to see how good of a job it does. And I think it samples pretty decently. I mean, I'm not seeing too many spots that are really sticking out. We're looking, 2 clones, so that does a pretty good spot there. I can do another one up. These hairs in here are going to be a little bit more difficult to work with. It didn't sample very well. So that kind of brings up a really good point here, is where it's sampling from a wrong area. Now it samples somewhere good. And we're going to go in here and just kind of remove some different spots, and just kind of taking our time. Just letting us do that. I think the heel tool is pretty great for kind of getting rid of these different blemishes on our bride's face here. And just, I'm not going to go and beat up all the blemishes too much, but it's letting us kind of go in and doing a little bit of work. If I wanted to clean up these eyebrows here, I could do so, and find a decent spot. And it didn't do the best there, but we kind of use that and do a little more work with cleaning that up. But I think that the sort of what it does just on a surface level, it's pretty good. Zooming up here to the hair where we removed, I think it looks pretty decent. I mean, just for a quick sort of automated tool here, other than your clicking. Yeah, Lightroom's losing a little bit here, so I'll jump out of this tool. But you can definitely see the difference, and take that further. I mean, there's a lot of retouching, extensive retouching you can do, but the clone tool is really great for just cleaning up a few things. Same thing on this gentleman here. Just removing some of those spots in there. We did the skin softening as well. We can kind of go in and just do some quick painting in, and just removing some spots, things like that. But moving into the last tools, I kind of wanted to go over the cropping and straightening, and I know that's two pretty big forms of thought with the cropping and straightening of images. Is it necessary to do? Do you need to straighten every image? I mean, to go to every image, holding the Command key, clicking for a vertical line, and moving to your next image, kind of same thing here. So I'm hitting the R key to get into cropping. I'm holding the Command key for my straighten tool. I'm hitting enter. Also, you can just stay in the crop feature and just go left and right. So now that I'm in crop, I can hold Command and go right. I can hold Command the whole time, basically, and just do my straighten feature. Go to my next image, hold straighten. Like I don't think that's the vertical line that we want to do. With this one, it might be more of a horizontal, might be a better option. Holding our option key, going to the next image. Now we have this vertical here we can use. Same sort of thing here, just use the ledge, sort of straighten our image out. And this starts to get very heavy-handed, very time-intensive. It's all about what you're wanting to, in these proofed images, what really is important. Is your bride really going to notice that the image is not completely straight? It's not level with the vertical horizon? Probably not, unless she's up against a pillar and it's sort of slanted and sideways. But I think that holding Command and going to each image and doing that adjustment, that's completely up to you. But it is great, when you're starting to work with an image and you want to start doing some creative cropping and things like that, I normally keep my ratio locked so that way the aspect ratio is the same. So what I can do in here is kind of going in and picking an image out specifically for a for an edit and doing some cropping in here. What's awesome about Lightroom is that I can save this crop in Lightroom, but it's non-destructive, so I can always go back, hit my R key on it, and I've always got the rest of my image back. I think that's pretty great tool, when talking about Lightroom and its flexibility versus like Photoshop and some of the other ones. You have to save cropped versions. Versus Lightroom, you always have that data there. It just, it's showing you sort of in a preview. Once you hit enter, you don't lose that once we close out of the catalog. So that sort of wraps up advanced editing and going through the images and applying those proof level advanced edits. Definitely write in, give me some questions, and let me know if there's anything else that you want to learn about at that stage or things that are important. But I think the best thing to sort of think about with Lightroom and workflow is what is absolutely necessary for you in previewing these images to your clients, and what's taking up your time, and what things can you sort of let go of. But that's all I have for you guys, and tune in for next month. We'll have the fifth and final workflow series article, which will be archiving, delivering the images to your client, and outputting with Lightroom, which I think is very important. It's going to start to bring in noise reduction, sharpening, resizing images, and different things like that. So just tune in next week, and I'll talk to you then.